Well, the doomsday mom, Lori Vallow, speaks up about what really happened to her kids, how they were murdered. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crime Buster. It's what some people are calling, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. Charlie Crime Buster, charliecrimebuster.com, and peacemakernetwork.com are copyrights owned by Charlie Crime Buster. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie Crime Buster. So glad to have you on the Charlie Crime train today. We'd like to encourage you to reach out with a shout out. If you're a seasoned listener or a very first-time listener especially, we would love to hear from you. You can reach us, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the program, you can be a part of our sponsor. That's right, peacemakernetwork.com. Just jump over there. You'll find out all about those brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. You can help support them, and you can help support the program. Just go to peacemakernetwork.com. I also need to tell you that if you'd like to get caught up on this case and others, you can jump over to charliecrimebuster.com. There you're going to find over 200 podcasts. And we had several of those podcasts that we actually did on this very case. There's a whole series about this doomsday couple that you probably would like to hear, especially because it's back in the news today. Just go to charliecrimebuster.com, hit that search engine, and you can, as James Buckland says, you can podcast binge. That's right, you can binge podcasts right there, charliecrimebuster.com. Hey, bear with me a moment. Before we get into today's topic, let me just take a moment and let you know that this podcast, unfortunately, is about children dying. And these children were abused in the strongest possible way. So, if you do know anything about children that are being abused, please say something. You can call the National Child Help Hotline, 800-422-4453. That's 800-422-4453. Or if you'd rather text, you can text HELP to 800-433-4453. 800-433-4453. Or you can go right over to their website, childhelp.org, and you'll find support and help. That is childhelp.org. Hey, we're going to put all those contacts right there in the show notes. So if you do know anything about children being abused, or you're being abused yourself, please say something, reach out. All right, let's get right into the heart of the matter. Lori Vallow, a.k.a. Doomsday Mom, well, she made news this week. Yep, this week, with a jailhouse interview with Dateline. And everybody, I felt, was waiting to see what she would say about the murder of her kids. This was her first media interview by Lori Vallow. It was conducted by veteran Dateline correspondent Keith Morrison. And throughout the interview, well, she dodged questions and sadly expressed no remorse about the murder of her children. She even said that she felt, quote, unquote, great about acting as her own attorney in her next upcoming trial. This one, by the way, will be about the shooting of her estranged husband, Charles Vallow. Hey, one headline about this interview, well, it read this way: Doomsday Mom, Lori Vallow, is speaking her truth for the very first time. Speaking truth, I got to tell you, folks, there was very little real truth in the things she said in that interview, and we will expose those lies in this episode. So this 51-year-old doomsday mom, along with her fifth husband, Chad Daybell, well, right now, They are currently serving time in prison. In prison. For the deaths, of her 2 children, 16-year-old Tylee Ryan and 7-year-old Joshua J.J. Vallow, and also Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy Daybell. They're in prison because those folks were killed. And in addition to that now, Lori Daybell, as I said earlier, she's facing charges in Arizona, conspiracy to commit murder in connection with the shooting death of her 4th husband, Charles Vallow. And there's yet more. There was also the attempted murder of Lori's niece's ex-husband, Brandon Bordeaux. Well, all throughout this interview, and it was a combative 90-minute interview, she was in confinement in Arizona when she was doing this interview. Well, Lori, she told Dateline that she was falsely accused, falsely convicted. She said she and her husband, Chad Daybell, who was also convicted in the 3 murders, she said they would all be exonerated. According to her, Jesus showed her the future. They were not incarcerated. She said, after I get exonerated, maybe I'll go on Dancing with the Stars and you can come. That's what she said to Keith Morrison. So Morrison then said, why do you think that would happen? And she said, quote unquote, I have seen things in the future that Jesus showed me when I was in heaven. We were not in jail. We were not in prison. Talk about delusional thinking. Well, that episode also features some interviews with retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Doug Hart, Sheriff Ron Ball, and the former lead detective of the Rexburg Police Department. Even Lori Vallow Daybell's son, Colby Ryan, talked to Morrison about his relationship with his mother. And on that same special, Madison County Prosecuting Attorney Rob Wood, he also featured in the interview, but I loved what he said. He said, listen, this case was really all about money, sex, and power. That's what Rob Wood said of his approach in the Daybell's case. He said, now there were those religious issues, but really, it was just about money and sex and trying to control other people who were in their way. They called those people in their way obstacles. And he got pretty plain about it. He said they got rid of them. And they profited from that. Now, what I was waiting for, and I believe most of those who watched the interview was waiting for, was to find out how these kids were really killed. We're going to get to that. But first, hey, let's take just a moment right now to lighten the load a little bit with what we call our weekly brief Crazy Crook Story of the Week. Now, our producer, James Buckland, and yours truly, Charlie Crimebuster, we constantly tell you on Charlie Crimebuster these days that we all leave a digital footprint. Well, this crazy crook, they left a footprint, large enough to be Bigfoot. Hang on now, you'll see what I mean. This is a content creator in Florida, of course, in Florida. She was arrested last week after she was allegedly caught shoplifting in her own video. That's what Cape Coral Police. You see, she visited, that's what they say, she visited a Target location on November the 20th. They went there in response to alleged theft that had occurred on October the 30th. An unknown female entered the store selecting items listed for sale. But once you got to that checkout register, this crazy crook did not scan the item's barcodes. Instead, she scanned a false barcode with cheaper prices. And as the tally came in, the police confirmed that there were 16 items valued at $500 that was taken. So then they released security images of the suspect. This lady was seen in a tan shirt and pants. Then a tipster, seeing those images that was released, she reported the suspect and said it appeared to be Marlena Velez, a content creator with more than 350,000 followers on TikTok. A video shared on Marlena's account showed this 22-year-old preparing for the alleged theft in the very same outfit and glasses. Showed her picking out items in the store and then loading them into her vehicle. Officer Ronnie Carter said, well, she essentially incriminated herself. Hey, by the way, don't look for the video. Of course, she took it down now. Well, Marlena was arrested, charged with 1 count of petty theft. She was released on bond. But get this, she had also been arrested last year for shoplifting in a Walmart in Cape Coral. Their surveillance footage showed her underringing items again at a self-checkout. Well, Marlena, she pled no contest, completed an anti-theft course. Can I say that again? She completed an anti-theft course, served 6 months of probation, and that just ended last month. I can't get away from that anti-theft course. Can you imagine? We actually teach a course on anti-theft. I could teach that course. You could too. I would say just don't steal, folks. So this digital content creator, who is crazy enough to incriminate herself before her more than 350,000 followers, she is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. All right, now back to our main focus. We are going to tell you what Lori Vallow said about how her children were killed. But she did not tell this to Keith Morrison. We did find out what she said in another way, and we'll tell you about that as well. However, in order to really understand this case, again, ye crime-fighting buddy Charlie Crimebuster here, we're going to help you understand it by sharing what we call a brief timeline of the case. Remember, by the way, we were there in those very first days, when those children were missing. Way before their bodies were found, we were talking about this case. You can listen to all that by going to charliecrimebuster.com. But let me briefly get you caught up on the case right now. It was in 2006. Lori married her then-husband, Charles Vallow. By the way, this was her 4th husband. And at the beginning, all was well with the family. Charlie, he was kind of a stable, solid kind of guy. Provided well for his family. Brought balance to the family. That was before the balance was turned upside down. 2014, things are going so well that they adopt young J.J. Vallow. That was Charles's nephew. Again, good things are happening to this family. That is until someone else comes into the picture, and it all starts to turn for the bad then. 2014, they adopt JJ. 2018, 4 years later, Lori becomes a fan of Chad Daybell's Doomsday books. She meets him. The two start doing podcasts together. They start attending a cult-like group of people that had strayed from the conventional teachings of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, all led by Chad Daybell. Hang on now, things start to happen rather quickly. 2018, she meets Chad. 2019, this is the year things go haywire. February of 2019, Charles Vallow files for divorce. He's aware that she's going off the deep end, has some very bizarre beliefs, and even stated because of those bizarre beliefs, he feared for his own safety and that of his children. He wasn't wrong. He wasn't paranoid. He reported that to the police. But Lori, being the queen of manipulating others, well, she convinced authorities that it was Charles that was causing the problems. That it was Charles that made up these things, and she made up stories about him to the police. Remember, queen of manipulation. So, July of 2019, now we have the first death. the first death of this doomsday trio. It takes place. Charles Vallow, Lori's husband, is shot to death by Alex Cox, Lori's brother. Now, in the other podcast, I referred to Alex Cox, Lori's brother, as Lori's spiritual hitman. Alex, after he shot and killed Charles Vallow, well, he claims to the police that it was self-defense. But later evidence, it proves that it was cold-blooded murder. So why was this first victim killed? Two reasons come to my mind. Can you say $1 million? That's right. Insurance money. $1 million. Only problem, to Lori and Chad's shock, Charles had already made his sister the beneficiary. Took Lori out of that spot. And there might have been another reason. 11 days before that, Charles had sent an email to Tammy Daybell to inform her that their spouses, Lori and Chad, were cheating. So you see, Charles Vallow was getting into the way for Lori and Chad to be together. In fact, after the shooting and killing that day, guess what? Neighbors reported they heard a pool party with loud music at Lori's home. Do you understand what that means? They not only killed him, they celebrated his murder. And Cox later told his own new wife that he did not feel bad about shooting Charles because he had killed a zombie. Zombie. That was the term that Chad and his cult used to describe people. Well, they were just getting into their way of their delusional mission on earth, being together. Chad and Lori. It is murder. And by the way, the next trial that Lori's facing, well, it's going to be for that murder of Charles Vallow. She already faced trial for the others. And guess what? She's going to be her own lawyer in that trial. That should be some sight, right? Now stay with me. Things are going to happen rather quickly. So we already have Charles Vallow, who was killed in the summer. On September the 8th, same year, Tylee Ryan, 16 years of age, Lori's daughter, goes missing. Tylee was last seen at Yellowstone National Park. We do now know, because of evidence that came out at the previous trials, that was the night that she was murdered. She, too, had been pronounced a zombie by Chad Daybell. So, September the 8th, Tylee, 16 years of age, is murdered. September the 22nd, just 14 days later, little JJ goes missing. On that same day, Melanie Gibb, a friend of Lori's, and her boyfriend, David Worth, they were staying at Lori's home. 10:30, Worth says she saw Alex Cox. Well, she saw Alex Cox take JJ, who was sleeping upstairs, to the bedroom. This was, by the way, JJ's last confirmed sighting. On the next morning, JJ was absent. We now know prosecutors proved little JJ was killed on the night of September the 22nd. So it was in the month of September of 2019 that both little JJ and Tylee were killed. But they're not through. On October the 2nd, Brandon Bordeaux. Now, Bordeaux was actually the estranged husband of Lori's niece, Melanie. Brandon was shot from a Jeep while driving home in Gilbert, Arizona. That bullet, by the way, just missed his head by inches. Now, he had been close to Charles and Lori Vallow's family, so he recognized that Jeep. The Jeep was a vehicle that was used by Tylee Ryan, but remember, Tylee Ryan is dead at this point. That Jeep drove away, but Bordeaux, he could give the license plate number, and he identified it as being registered to Charles Vallow. By the way, that Jeep, it was driven by the shooter, Lori's spiritual hitman, Alex Cox. So here we have, follow me now, Tylee is killed, little JJ is killed, they tried to kill Brandon, and now, on October the 19th, less than 1 month after little JJ was killed, Tammy Daybell, Chad's wife, dies. Later, it was proven it wasn't natural death, it was murder. They had to exhume the body because Chad wanted her buried before anybody could do an autopsy. But the courts prevailed, and it was revealed she had been strangled, and it appeared somebody else held her down while she was being strangled. And prosecutors, they brought proof that Chad and Alex were right there in the same area during the time of her death. Oh, follow me. In 5 months, 5 people die. Incredibly, believe it or not, Alex, her spiritual hitman, he himself died in December the 12th. That was natural causes. But 4 of these 5 were murdered by this doomsday trio of death. Chad, Lori, and Alex. And it was all instigated by the doomsday duo of death, Lori and Chad. Less than a month after Tammy was killed on November the 5th, same year, Chad and Lori get married in Hawaii. And then it was November the 26th. That's when it all became known. There was a nationwide search. It was launched into the disappearance of Tylee and JJ. We were covering that in real time. And while the world was looking for these 2 young people, Chad and Lori were living large in Hawaii. Already 4 people have been murdered. The attempted murder of another in less than 90 days. So while this case has been, drawn out over several years now, it all really happened really quickly. Less than 90 days. All of that happening in 90 days. These children killed. Her 4th husband killed. Tammy killed. In less than 90 days. All of this in itself is unthinkable. But I am going to tell you now what Lori said about how her children really died. Nobody really knows. But first, let me take a moment to mention we have been talking about children. Children, again, who have been abused in the most horrible way possible. So again, please, let me say, if you know anything about children that are being abused, please say something. Call the National Child Helpline, 800-422-4453. Or text HELP to 800-433-4453. Or you can go online to childhelp.org and find support and help for these children that are being abused. All those contacts, once again, we're going to drop them in the show notes. The most unthinkable, though, is how this doomsday mom lied to the American people about how her children died. And that lie was not told to Keith. It was a lie she told her own son on his own podcasts. When her son, Colby, asked his mom what really happened to his brother and sister, she comes up with this story. That somehow Tylee, who wasn't feeling well, who was having problems, and she suddenly got into a fit of rage and killed little JJ. And so then she could not live with herself, and so then she committed suicide. So this is what Lori is telling her son about how the children died. That Tylee was in a fit of rage. She killed little JJ. Maybe didn't mean to, but she killed him. Then she could not live with herself, and so she committed suicide. Oh, my friend, you can certainly tell the best way to know when Lori's lying. It's when her lips move, right? Yeah. We know now that this is not true. We know now that they did not die at the same time. We know that Tylee was killed first, days before little JJ was killed. So, as the saying goes, that story does not compute. This is an insult to the memory of her children. She not only will not own up to her own deception and delusions that caused these children to be murdered, she now wants to paint her own sweet daughter, who truly loved her little brother JJ, as the murderer. And yet, they, this trio of doom, this trio of death, they not only killed Tylee, but they mutilated her body. They sawed her up in pieces, folks, and burned her in a fire pit. This is unthinkable. So we know now that what she said happened to the children isn't true. But here's how I believe it went down, and this is what the evidence says. Here's how the kids were really killed. Not the lies that she told the world on her son's podcasts. They were killed by Alex Cox, Lori's spiritual hitman. He had been brainwashed by Lori and Chad that he was doing God's work to kill innocent people. And it also appears now that he was helped in the actual killing by either or both Lori and Chad. So, Chad Daybell, he's right where he should be, facing the death penalty. It is good for him to get up every day thinking he's going to die soon. Lori, well, she's serving several life sentences. She's about to come up for trial again. I would love to see her, too, face the death penalty in the death of Charles in the next coming trial. Both of them deserve to die, and as far as I'm concerned, rot in hell for these tragic deaths. That's as simple as I can put it. So now you know. Now you know what Lori Vallow said happened to her children, and that is a total lie. But we know what really happened. And thankfully, the people that did it are now facing justice. So until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster here, saying be safe, be alert. For the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.